One. Okay, we got the official go ahead. Hi, everybody. My name is Derek Taylor David. My pronouns are he, him. I am the Phoenix, Arizona, and Seattle, Washington Atlassian Community Champion. I just have to remember the branding since we just rebranded again, but that's my new title. Thank you all for joining us. We really do appreciate it today. We have Tomo Lennox here today with us, and he's going to present You Can't Do Real Kanban in Jira Without Some Plugins. I fully agree. Kanban is absolutely incredible once it's been implemented and you have a team that understands it and why it works and the different aspects of it, just because it really does help control the flow in which not you do software development with any kind of engineering, especially for the one that was originally designed for. So when you have it up and running, it's great and it works and it's very, very functional. But out of the box, Jira does have some of the issues where it just doesn't do it's it is a great workflow engine in terms of getting and tracking and making sure that things get done. But for this specific use case, it requires a fair amount of tweaking. And you can either go back into the admin menu and do Kanban enough in order to get it to work. But I think Tomo's going to show us some additional plugins that will make that part of the journey a lot less manual, get us the features that we're looking for, and get it to where it just simpler to understand. I haven't seen some of this here yet, but this is one of the ones that I specifically asked that we go through and see. Very much looking forward to today. So we're going to pass it over here to Tomo here just in a quick second. I want to thank everybody from the Seattle, Washington group who's joining us here today, Phoenix, Arizona, Poznan, Poland. Sorry for mispronouncing that. I apologize. And Pasadena, California. Thank you all for joining us today. We really do appreciate it. Tomo, I'm going to give it over to you, but I will be monitoring the chat and answering what questions I can, and then also prompting you because I know that you're going to be busy during the presentation. So, Tomo, go ahead and take it away, and you're good to go.
Thank you very much. And let's see, we're aiming for like 45 minutes. Is that right?
That would be great. Yeah, we'll
Okay.
however much
Okay,
time
we'll
you
aim for
need.
around there.
That we'll do questions along the way.
And we have a pretty small group, so feel free to just jump in and ask questions whenever. I'm sure I can accommodate that. So, feel free to ask questions at the end, but if you have a question, just jump right in. Okay. So first let me say that I really am a Kanban geek. This is a costume I wore. It was Halloween. I don't wear this every day, but I really am a Kanban person. And I wanted to give you just a really quick summary of another whole presentation I have of when to do Scrum and when to do Kanban. But I just want to spend a couple of minutes on this if you haven't done it before. Um, if you have well-defined work, Kanban, it's the way to go. So much easier. If you have nebulous work that you're not quite sure what it is, you have to try stuff, Scrum's a little bit better. If you've got kind of like chaos and you have this 5-year plan, but you don't know what you're going to do tomorrow, Kanban's a lot more chaos tolerant. If you've got weeks of stability where you kind of know where things are and you can plan sprints, Scrum will do that. If you have a lot of specialists in your team, it doesn't work very well in Scrum, but it works okay in Kanban. So it's a place to do Kanban. If what you're missing is your vision, you don't quite know where the work is coming, releasing after you've done it, and you don't quite know where your requirements are coming from, Kanban gives you better vision up and downstream. If you're having trouble just getting focused because you're so distracted by everything, Scrum is actually a lot better for that. I really like Scrum where you're just barraged all the time and you have to lock the doors down and do a sprint. Um, if you have a process where it says first we design it, then we code it, then we test it, then we release it, Kanban, it's great. If everything that comes out of the box is different, this one says first fly to Europe, then talk to the customer, then fly back, then make a prototype, but the very next one of the box says do a research project, you know, Kanban kind of breaks down. Scrum tolerates that nicely. Um, in your increments, you deliver in Kanban when you're ready, which is often a really more comfortable thing to saying, it's the end of a sprint, it's the end of a sprint, quick release. But there's this one really serious Kanban problem where you're never ready. The team never gets their act together. They never finish anything. They never deliver anything. They say, we're doing Kanban. That's a problem. But on the other side, on the Scrum teams, estimation is a black art. And so A lot of teams never do figure out how long it's going to take them to do things, and they're always chaos at the end. For process definition, we'll talk about a little bit. Explicit policies are per column, which I like a little better than definition of done. You can do them both. For new work coming in, this replenishment process from Kanban is a lot smoother than this balance the big backlog thing that Scrum usually does. And then last one, Kanban is designed to start where you are and then you continually evolve, which is built right into the process. Works really cool. Scrum has got this transformation thing where first you fire all the BAs and the project managers, then you hire the POs and the Scrum masters, and just takes a long time to get yourself organized. So when you're looking at the colors there, I kind of like Kanban in general. It often fits projects better, although there are some places where Scrum is better. Anybody want to ask questions on any of that? So I present this as a there are places you want to use Kanban. Kanban was developed by David Anderson, the master of Kanban, who teaches us to solve business problems using Kanban boards. And he has a lot of really interesting Kanban boards in the pictures of his book on his website that are post-its and lines and tape, and he does all kinds of crazy things. If you look at his work, you'll see some of it. Um, if you're in Jira, you can do a basic Kanban board. Right? Just board, Kanban, bing, Kanban board. From which you could theoretically do Kanban. But when you look in the blue book on Kanban, there's these things like this, right? Where I've got these different elements here, and I've got different things I'm counting, and I'm have different indicators. Like, how am I going to do that in Jira? It just doesn't. Um, Here's a place where I've got whip limits based on groups of columns. Well, Jira doesn't do that. One column, one whip limit, no groups of columns. No multiple teams on one board. In Kanban in the books, it always has these interesting things where there's these weird clumps and there's these different colored dots, and they organize things in not quite rectangular ways. Um, it's just really hard to do that using a Jira board. So you can do your common matrix, all tasks, all columns alike, that works. But as soon as you start getting into these more complicated things that are part of natural Kanban, it just breaks down. Um, in Kanban, in the book, there's these explicit policies. In each column, you can put the rules, like how does this column work? It's like the definition of done divided over your whole board. It's really nice. But in Jira, there's no place to put this, and there's some workarounds, and they're all ugly. So Jira only supports the most basic Kanban boards, but it does support plugins really well. So we just have to find the right plugin. Here's a table from just stuff I went to the web and I went to ChatGPT actually, and I said, what kind of Kanban extensions do we have for Jira? And it kind of mapped them out. If you can see here, there's kind of two clumps. There's this Kanban combined whip and this agile advantage or advanced agile boards that kind of cover a whole bunch of these. And then there's another group down here that does the flow metricy kind of things. Nave, actionable agile. I've never used broken build, but I used those two before. And then some kind of in the middle ones. Quality Kanban. It's a little bit more like Jira itself. And so I want to talk especially about these up here, the ones that affect the display more, although you can get more metrics in other ones. And there was one more I found that I've never seen before and couldn't find information on, but Mr. Add-on seems to be a Kanban enhancement technique that I couldn't find. I want to talk today in particular about this advanced agile board, one that I used a lot a couple of years ago on a big project. There's me up in the corner, seeing my Kanban suit on the board. Um, if you use this one, whoops, it shows up down here on the. It shows up down there. You can click on it. It has the most wonderful policies, these explicit policies. So in Scrum, there's this one definition of done, and it's in a document somewhere in a repository somewhere. and you can find it, but it was probably 2 years old, and it doesn't actually apply to anymore. In Kanban, you break the definition of done into one little one per column. So instead of saying when I'm all done with the project, part of the definition of done says you've talked to the customer and gotten the customer request signed. Well, now that I'm all done, it's a little bit late for that. So you put that right in the first column that says you can't move this card to the next column until you've got the customer request done. So advanced agile boards lets you put these things, so you just hover over the name of the column, and then you can put as much stuff as you want under here that says what you're supposed to be doing in this column. Really, really nice, especially if you have new developers, if you have people switching projects, if periodically someone says, hey, I pulled this out and it was empty. Well, it can't be empty because in the previous column you're supposed to set it. And you go to the previous column, it's like, oh, we changed that, didn't we? Picks it up, and voila. If you ever have any question, hover over it, it's there. So they have really excellent explicit policies, and there's even some more places you could put information, but this is one of my favorite. To me, real Kanban says you have an explicit policy at the top of each column, and this one works really well. Questions yet?
I'm already in love.
Okay. Um, in addition, so this is you can see there's some columns down here, but here's a group. You can group your columns together, and the group can have stuff on it. So in this one, we had a Scrum team, Scrumban, I guess, and we put some information right in the column header that was when the sprint started and ended, and then links out to critical resources in the project. We always had critical resources somewhere. We could just never quite figure where they were. And here you can put things in places that are really easy to find. WIP limits. So most people know about Kanban. There's a Kanban board and there's a WIP limit that says don't try to do too much at once, you'll get nothing done. So if you actually say for each column, don't do more than 4 things at once because there's only 3 people on the team, it actually goes faster. So that's basic Kanban. You can read your Kanban book. But on the David Anderson boards, there are whips all over the place. So in this one, here's whip on a column. And Jira will do that just fine. That little number up there says, you have three tasks, 3 stories, 3 work items, whatever, in this column. Uh, but you can also do WIP limits on a group of columns. You can say these are all closely related columns in one team. And so instead of putting a limit on the individual columns, we're going to put a limit on this group of columns. Really common high powered Kanban technique from the Kanban maturity model. And this supports it easily. Just stick it on there, and you can put a limit on it so that you can focus there. Or I can take a swim lane. I can divide my board into swim lanes by all kinds of things. It could be separate sprints, separate teams, and I can put a WIP limit on the swim lane that says this swim lane shouldn't have more than a certain number of things on it. Or I can put a WIP limit on a column within a swim lane. So this swim lane has this WIP limit on this column, but the one down below has a different WIP limit. Or I can put a WIP limit on a person. And this is really kind of powerful. So when you get these multifunctional teams where you can design and you can prototype and you can test and you can release, um, I can say, I don't care how good you are, if you're working on more than 7 things at a time, like you're holding up the show. So uh, for each person, I want a personal WIP limit, and I can set it differently for each person. I can say that lead guy who's been here 7 years and can do everything, I got to give him a big WIP limit. And for this new intern guy, two, no more than 2. So I can set personal WIP limits. So this advanced agile boards is really, really good for setting different kinds of WIP limits, much more like in the Kanban maturity model, where if you find something that's going to be a problem, you put a WIP limit there. Questions on WIP limits?
When you're setting it by individual, you can customize it by individual, but does it also let you set a default if you don't want to set one for every individual person.
Oh, let's see. Can I set a default? I don't remember that. Um, I don't remember doing defaults. I remember it's easy to copy, but that's a great question. And of course it's evolved a couple of years since I last used it. So maybe they do now, but I don't remember it being having that capability. It's a good idea. Oh, also let me note that you can turn off all these WIP limits. As we go on, there's more and more stuff you can display to understand the board. But at some point, you get so much stuff that you turn stuff off, and you can turn off all these little display indicators if you want. The limits are still somewhere, but you don't have to have all these little counters displayed everywhere if you don't want. On a basic Jira board, you get these little bubbles that stack up, and you can click on the bubbles and get individual people. But in advanced Agile boards, you can put filters, and you can filter by anything. But right now, these are filters by team members, and if they have like different Jira logins, I can put both of those under one filter, or if they have different roles in different boards or whatever, I can put a whole JQL query here. And I've often had just huge ones in there where when I click on Steve, I want to see not everything he's working on because some of them are in a different place. I want to see only the ones in this area. Or only the ones in this release because the others are we're not even looking at now. I can do all kinds of exotic filters that you can't do with this. So you get just the view you want, or I can have groups of people. These filters are really handy. I often have them for team members. I have them for releases. I have them for like if I have my sprint review, my whatever review, I can tag them so that I can say, okay, let's see the ones for review 7, and I put a little tag, and whoop, there they come up. Very powerful filters. Here's one for different releases. These were a project where they labeled their releases M1, M2, M3, M4, and I can just click on each one and see just that release, and I can drag them around back and forth, so I have the hot ones on the top. Okay, on this board, I can put colors on the cards, and the colors are just this little stripe on the side here, but I can have logic behind it so those colors mean something in particular. So for instance, this little orange here means this was for milestone 3. And so I can look at the board in one glance and I can say, oh yeah, milestone 3. I'm working on milestone 3 all over the place. And this one is for milestone 6. Why are we working on milestone 6 right now? That seems weird. Somebody's working on that and it probably shouldn't be. Why do we bring that one in so early? If we're really bringing it in so early, maybe it should be part of milestone 3. So just immediately you can look at the board and see this. You remember that show, The Matrix? That guy sits behind the screen and watches those little tinkle, tinkle, tinkle down, and he knows everything that's happening on the planet. This is kind of like that. You can put these little indicators so instead of hunting through databases and doing queries, this stuff just shows up and you see it right away. Here's one with no milestones on it. We're doing some work and we haven't even ascended to a milestone yet. That seems a little suspicious. Maybe our next review meeting we should put some milestones on those, or maybe in the stand-up I should ask people, why are you working on this thing with no milestone? And they say, oh, this is all new milestone 3. Okay, click, click, click. Now it's milestone 3. And you can use JQL to set those color bars. I did, just some really simple stuff here, but it can be anything you want. The columns on the board, sometimes you end up with a lot of columns. And so this thing is really flexible at visualizing. So I can just use these little greater than or less than. I can say, I can make a wide column or a narrow column. I can open it up if I want so that it looks like the sprint board, with these big tasks, or I can skinny it down so it looks like the more Kanban board tasks. I can have either one. or I can collapse them down to nothing or just a little symbol, so I can have a lot of columns and not show them all at once. Sometimes it's really good to have a wide board that has a lot of detail in it, but on this stand up, I only really want to look at the work that's defined and in progress, and testing and that kind of stuff. But in the refinement meeting, I don't care about that. I really want to see the backloggy ones and the semi-refines and the needs points and things like that. So I can configure my board with just click, click, click to get just the ones I want. This is something really powerful. You can put dependencies on them, and you can graph these things. So it says which task depends on which other tasks. Sometimes you say, I'm working on this task, but it can't be done until this predecessor is done. And that predecessor isn't even scheduled yet. So your task is a dead end. So you can look at this. Again, it's got a little turn on and off. If you have too many dependencies, it turns into knots fast. So you don't have it on all the time often. But when you start to wonder about your dependencies, then you can then you can turn it on and look at it and see if everything's looking right. You can also change the colors of those arrows so that each one means something different. Like this one has to be written before that one, or this one has a common thing, this one, whatever kind of things you want to relate, you can color them differently. And the order is kind of interesting. Sometimes it says the dependency of this one, goes this way, but sometimes they're backwards. That I can't do this one until I've done that one first, and I haven't even scheduled that one yet. So having the arrows lets you kind of quick look at the board and say, are all my dependencies going in the right direction? Or do any of them reach off the board to stuff I'm not even working on? Again, it can overload the board, but you turn it on, you look at it, you say, it looks good. So you can also set the columns to give you signals. So I set this one with a minimum in this column for selected for development, and this says there is only one thing in selected for development. So at my next refinement meeting, I'm only going to have one thing to talk about. Maybe the product owner should pull a few more things in from the backlog so that we have enough for a refinement meeting. So this lights up yellow that says he better do that. Here's one where I set a max of 4. This is in the new filter. Oops. When you get up to 4, the red light comes on that says you have a bunch of new things. You should have a meeting. So instead of the kind of scrum idea of, oh, it's Tuesday, time for the refinement meeting, I can just set a signal and I can say, we have the refinement meeting when this thing lights red. And otherwise, don't worry about it because those will sit here. So we can have these signals to tell us when to do things. Here's another one that says in the refined column, we don't have enough things. I've got a minimum of 8. I probably can't start a full sprint with this. We better do some refinement before the next sprint. And you just quick glance at the board and it tells you all that stuff. Questions?
Yeah, is the color coding specifically set to minimums and maximums, or are there other paradigms you can use for color coding?
I believe for those there is minimum maximum.
Okay.
Is there any more? I think those are the ones I always used. I think that's it. Let's see. That's not that interesting. Okay, so let me talk about Scrum. Just a second. Let me quick grab something right back. Okay, so often I have teams that really, really want to do Scrum, either because they really, really want to do Scrum or because they're one of those teams that really makes sense to do Scrum. And there's a cool way to do Scrum in here I wanted to show you. If you, instead of using the Scrum board, you can use this Kanban board, Scrumban board. You set it up like this with the automatic adding on in the fields on a sprint. And now I've got my Kanban-y columns, which are kind of a substitute for subtasks. I know a lot of Scrum teams I work on, every time they have a meeting, they'll say, okay, for this, someone's got to design it, someone's got to code it, someone's got to test it. Okay, you take the coding subtask, and you take the design subtask, you take the test subtask. And then you get these piles of subtasks everywhere. In Kanban, the subtasks are kind of columns, right? The work just kind of naturally moves from column to column. But the sprints can be set up as the swim lanes. So here's sprint 11, and if I scroll down, I can find all the past sprints just down below there, all in their own columns. Right, so here's sprint 11, and it's active. It knows whether it's active or passive, and I can complete the sprint just like in the sprint board. Or I can edit it, or I can delete it. I can get rid of a whole sprint. I can say, we're in sprint 88 now. We don't really care about sprint 11. Let's just clean this one away. I can just delete it if I want. But I have this Scrumban thing now where I have Kanban within sprints. And each sprint is its own little Kanban board, all stacked up as swim lanes. Works pretty well. So here's them collapsed. You can collapse it or you can expand it. So here's the previous sprints just all stacked up back there. And I can count the number of cards in each sprint, which makes a really good estimator. A lot better than story points. You can create sprints. You can also do other kinds of boards. So when you create a board, there's that standard, I want one of those Kanban boards like we've been talking about. Or you can say, here's an existing project in Jira and they already have a Kanban board. Just pull it in and you click this and it just converts it. But you can have a whole bunch of other boards that depend, mostly rows and column-y things. And here's a whole bunch of them you can do, but you can customize them to anything you want. So let me show you one of them. Here's a board which has the releases across the top and then lists the epics under each one. So I can see that I've got this release 5 only has one epic in it. And release 4 doesn't have any, so that's something I want to talk about. But the release 6 here, I've got 26 in. And that's more than that team could have done, right? So I've got my releases, I've got to say, I've got to cut this one back a little bit because you're never going to get that many done in a release. And what are these things doing out here if we're not going to put stories in them? So all those discussions that we should be having, just naturally fall out of this board at the epic level, right? At the, not at nitty gritty of the story level, at subtask level, at the epic level, I can shuffle epics around to get reasonable releases. And it's a board. They just slide back and forth. I can just shuffle around until I like it. Here's a priority board. So you can use this for your task estimation if you want, story estimation, by points. But in this case, it's by priorities. So I can say of all of these epics or all these priorities, epics in this case, or stories, tasks, whatever, but epics. What are the most important epics? What are the next and what are the lowest, whatever? And I can rank them all. And I can say what epics aren't set yet because I should be dragging these over until I've got a set. And then when I look at the releases, I can say, are the high priority things in the current releases? Or if I put the high priority things in the low releases? Or maybe I had to do some of them because of dependencies. It all becomes reasonably easy work to just look at this and shuffle around until everybody nods their head. Yeah, it's about the best as it gets. I can see the dependencies, I can see the releases, I can see the priorities. It's pretty easy after just a little while to get a visual indicator for this and come up with some shuffling of things that you like. Questions? And just
Somebody
showing you can
did
stack things
ask,
up.
is this data center?
Is it what?
The message message was from Tanya, is this data center?
Oh, I see. Yes. Yes. I think it was. Like I said, this was a couple years ago, and we made that transition. I think everything was data center. We gave up the local. Okay, so that's it. I'm a consultant. Feel free to call me in. Say we like a day's worth of advice or whatever. We'll work something out. Kanban, Scrum. My new thing is AI now. I've got a new thing in how to do AI as a team, or you can ask for my Scrum versus Kanban. Any questions? Any discussion? Any criticism? What should I fix in here? Who knows something I don't know I should fix?
I only have the most pedantic typo fix for you, but I can DM that later.
I would be delighted. You can tell me, you can send it to me, whatever you want. I'd be delighted.
Yeah.
I have some dyslexia and I don't even see them sometimes, so I'm delighted to get feedback.
Yeah. I started out as a proofreader, so I can't turn it off.
A fine skill.
But I guess this was implied pretty strongly, but I'm just clarifying. So this is not an overlay on the Kanban boards that you build standard in Jira. You would be building specifically a board in this app.
Yes, that's right. It will be glad to import those. You don't have to recreate them. It'll import them and then let you add more stuff to it. Mm-hmm. Or you could just go from scratch and then all the data's underneath it, right? Because it's the same data, just a presentation layer. Mm-hmm. Yes, all the stuff that's already there is pretty easy for this thing to suck in. And then it goes a lot further from there.
How much does this one tend to cost?
Oh, again, it was a couple of years ago I got this one, so I don't know the cost. And ironically, our sponsor knows the answer, and I think he couldn't be here today.
Yeah, he did mention he had an unfortunate last-minute offsite that he needed to attend, so he did send his apologies. But if you do need to reach out to him, just
I can always just look at the marketplace later.
Okay.
Yeah, it's right there. But it didn't seem like it was one of those killer ones, now and then you get those monster things, and this was one of the moderate ones, I thought.
So I put Filip's at least Atlassian community email in the chat right now. If you want to go ahead and reach out to him about that afterwards. I don't have his business one, at least with me right now, but at least this is a place to start.
If I could put another plug for these guys, that when I discovered this thing, not everything was quite as smooth as I wanted it to be. And so I would write to them. I'd say, you should do this. And like 3 days later, they had it. And then, I'd have another, wouldn't it be cool if it did this? And then next week, they have it. This is one of the most responsive teams I have ever worked with. They are really, really on top of this stuff. And if you've got a good idea, they suck it up right away. And this thing just got better and better and better as I used it. I just totally fell in love with it. Any other comments, suggestions, big picture discussion, Scrum versus Kanban?
Does anybody live in that middle world in between, like I do as a DevOps engineer and an admin, where we are Scrum banned?
You could do pretty decent by the book Scrum and do Kanban within the sprint and be 100% Scrum compliant, or you can lift up that sprint requirement and do a real hybrid.
Yeah, that does help out for teams like mine, where we are responsive to tickets that come in Kanban style, where we do not know what the user is going to be requesting throughout the day. But we also have the Scrum related things where there are things in development that we would want to get done, improvements we want to make to our, at least our DevOps pipeline, that we know that we want to plan of consume capacity for, but we do live in that middle ground where we just unfortunately can't plan everything.
Right. That's a really common thing where I'll talk to basically a support team, and their management or their scrum master says, well, how many tickets are people going to file next week? They say, I don't know. And they say, well, how are we going to plan a sprint? And they said, I don't know. And Kanban says, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. Is when they come in, here's how to process them. And if you end up getting them all done, you're idle, great. Work on the process, clean things up. When the next ticket comes in, go. It's for a service responsive team. Kanban's way to go.
Yeah. We only implied this section, but I am very interested in looking into the flow metrics, the CFD, the forecasting stuff too, because that's been the bane of my existence, is trying to get actual metrics out of Jira for Kanban processes where nothing is done until like 6 months later when the project is over.
Yes. And so I've had that problem too. And I've used, just when you have a Kanban state, a column on things, you can have that narrow little development thing where it says design code test, but then you can have more columns off to the side that says, then we put it into a release, and then the release goes through the pipeline, it does this,
Yeah.
and then we have the pre-release, then we have the customers, and then
I
the
think
customer finally sees
my
here.
team has like, I think 15 columns.
Yeah, and so that is real, and then you just have to decide what the column ranges you want to use your metrics on.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You say from everything from this column where someone said, yeah, let's do it, to this column that says it's in the pipeline. I want to count that, because that's what the dev team worries about. And I've got this other metric that says how fast can the DevOps part of it, get this part out. Even if it's the same team, you might
Yeah.
have two metrics there. So if you can get it into those nice columns for Kanban, you can decide where to put the numbers. And I've had really good luck with just counts. There's all these exotic metrics out there, but for me, just counting things is really pretty clean. Throughput metrics. You say each week, we get this many things between these two columns.
Mm-hmm.
And that ends up holding up really well. And so you say, oh, but now we've got 30 things. Well, if I can do 15 per week and I've got 30 things, that's 2 weeks. Ding, done.
Yeah. Yeah, throughput metrics. I've not been able to figure out how to get them on Jira out of the box. So,
but that's the thing that I do, and it just takes a couple queries, I think, to get that. There's another package. I'll have to do that another presentation on that has nice metrics where you can plot the growth of things.
Mm-hmm.
And some people really like the Monte Carlo. Right? There's a couple of the tools that do Monte Carlo. I'll put them down here. I've used Nave and I've used Actionable Agile. And those are really nice. I'm working on my own separate math that does it a different way, but those are pretty cool if you haven't tried them.
All right, awesome.
Any other discussion? Well, thanks for having me today. Look forward to a presentation to you again some other time.
Yeah, hopefully soon. We'll reach out to the different teams to see if there's any of the other topics that you brought up that sound interesting, and we'll post them back to all of the different groups and make sure that it does get shared. If you were nice enough to join us from one of the other cities, either in Poland or in Pasadena, we do appreciate it. More content here coming soon. Tomo, again, thank you very much for your time. We very much do appreciate it. I'll try and post up the link to this video as soon as I get a chance to get it uploaded to the other channel here in a little bit. But take care. We hope to see you soon. If you are a part of my Seattle group, we have 2 events coming up here very soon, a big event in July and then another one here just in a couple of days on site in Bellevue, Washington. And we would love to see you all there. So take care, be safe this weekend, have a good time, and we will see you all very soon. Bye-bye.